Hello viewers, the last time I talked to you it was about chapter 3 and 4 of Fathers of Nation. Today I'm going to talk about chapter 5 and 6. And so as we open chapter 5, this is what we meet, a rebirth. I call it a rebirth because Dr. Folabi has a transformation within himself. Now this chapter starts just as Dr. Afolabi is invited to go for the annual conference to Washington. Pamela, the wife, is so excited because she has taken 6 years without visiting her father. Now, the father lives in Boston as a widower because Pamela's father died, died long ago. Now, Pamela takes advantage of this visitation by Dr. Folabi, and so she books so that they travel together to Washington. On arrival in Boston, we are told by Dr. Folabi that things are not the same as his Harvard days. He realizes that there are a lot of older people as compared to the past, and these people are being taken care of by younger people, not exactly from their family, but others who are just paid to do so. Now, we realize that Dr. Afolabi is a secretive person because when he goes to a supermarket to buy some razor and other stuff, he meets Pamela's father, and he realizes that the father is not happy at all. He's quite lonely, and the scene he meets in the supermarket is a saddening one. She's he feels and he swears that he'll never at all share this incident with the wife Pamela, and indeed that is what we see. On return in Nigeria, we realize that things cannot work again for Pamela and Dr. Folabi. But before that, we just realize that within, as they are traveling in the plane, there is a switch, and Pamela just notices that a stranger comes and tells her he has to sit in her position. And, he kind of cheats and says that it's an arrangement by the people in the management of the plane. But he was just being a schemer, what can happen with Longway. So Longway insists, and so this cranky fella sits with Dr. Folabi, and in the process shares Path Alpha with Dr. Folabi because he knows very well Dr. Folabi is for Way Omega, and soon he might be defending it in the summit. Pamela is not so happy about this switch of events, and as we proceed, we find later that on arrival in Nigeria, they meet Femi, a cousin to Dr. Folabi, in the house, and he's not quite happy. Pamela is not happy. He thinks that there's a foul play, and possibly they've just planned to bring this lady to replace her because she can't have a child, and it's not biological. Pamela does not just possibly want an African child out of Dr. Folabi. At some point while they're in Washington, Dr. Folabi sees a child born of 2 parents, one an African and a white, and thinks maybe that is what the children exactly would be. And so as we go through the text, we realize that Pamela is so annoyed to have found this lady in the house, and she asks a lot of questions. And whenever she asks, we realize that Femi is not ready to talk to her. He only wants to talk to Dr. Folabi. It's a male chauvinism aspect of the Nigerian, And as we end this chapter, we realize that Pamela does not listen to Dr. Folabi at all. She decides to go away even at night and leaves back to Boston. We are left in suspense because we do not know exactly what happened in the text, but that is exactly what we see. Now, as we proceed to the next chapter, that is chapter 6, I consider it as Melusi's fate because it's focusing on Comrade Melusi himself. I hope you remember Comrade Melusi and the country he comes from. Now, it is sunrise in Banjul, and the heads of state have to continue with the summit. it is an important day because it's the opening day for the summit, and the 50 heads of states will be meeting. Um, it is here that Comrade Melusi now finds a hurdle at the checkpoint, and the security tell him, "You cannot go in with the, um, he had this needle that he always carried around." He says, "I'm so sick," and how many people are sick anyway? If you look in our country, there are so many people ailing from diabetes, and he tries to defend, even becomes temperamental at some point. And at one point, the security man tells him, "The more I look at you, the more I trust you." Possibly it becomes trustworthy. But in the process, as he's allowed and he's cleared, he goes in. And the author takes us into a flashback so that we have to understand, how did Melusi come into this summit? What made him come in there? And so everybody has a motivation that pushes them into things. And so we are reminded that at one point he met with a Tad Longway. You remember Tad Longway? I talked about him in the previous meeting with Dr. Folaby in the plane. He's such a schemer, and he knows what he wants. He knows that Path Alpha has to be a success at the end of the day. So we see Comrade Melusi meeting Tad Longway in a hotel. And this is a hard time, so there are not many customers in such a hotel because people cannot afford to eat out. Possibly they would just have to sit. And as Comrade Melusi meets Tad Longway, that is after Zimbabwe has gone through a lot of hell and economic times, the leaders have weakened the opposition, and they're making sure that they strengthen their own people as they weaken the opposition. We realize at this point that Melusi tells all to the stranger. He becomes so open because of the situations he has encountered. He informs the stranger that the Ndebele people are really attacking the opposition. And the new ruler has betrayed the Ndebele folk because he's only now using a group known as the Kukurahundi. Kukurahundi is a group that has to clear the enemies and make the way for the leadership. So the Ndebele people are used as a retaliation mechanism, and Comrade Melusi has to encounter the wrath of the leader. Why does he have to encounter this? He once vied for a post as a president and he lost it. So the leader makes him really feel it, and the first thing he has to encounter from the Kakurahundi is to lose Ziliza. Now, if you read this story, you realize that Ziliza is a beautiful lady, and Melusi cannot even forget about this wife. The wife was strangled, and he came from work only to get to his house, find Ziliza having died and her eyes open, and he's really affected, traumatized out of this. Those are effects of war and civil situations in many countries. I think we keep seeing this, and maybe we should learn lessons from it and see, as leaders, even though we may get to leadership, whichever way, should we really do this to our opponents? In this chapter, therefore, Comrade Melusi and Long Tadway meet again, and they decide to have a traditional cuisine. And Melusi is so happy about this, but Tad Longway does not find the food quite exciting. He leaves it to Melusi to finish it. Now, we realize that there is a new name for the leader, and he's now called Bomber. Why do you think he's called the Bomber? It's because possibly he's causing a lot of harm politically. A lot of violence is generated in his country. And remember, he's part of the heads of state in the summit. So Comrade Melusi confesses that he was quite naive. He thought that politics was just a child's game. And I think everybody agrees it's not. Now, in this story, we realize that Comrade Melusi had formed a group known as NIP, an opposition party to the leadership, and he loses it. And when he loses it, the Bomber makes him feel it. It is through rigged elections, what we feel in Africa every day, the rigging of elections, that this leader becomes the head of state at the end of the day. Due to economic recession or the crisis that is facing the nation, the government fails to cover people in the calamities they face economically. We have a lot of drought in Zimbabwe, and that time again, they demolish businesses, and so that is how Melusi loses his livelihood. It's only the presence of Third Longway that gives him hope. So we all again see hope at the end of the day, regardless of what you go through. At some point, there is some light, you know. And as I end this chapter, we realize that the trouble that the Zimbabwean people are facing is the adamance from the leader. It's ironical, indeed, that a leader, after getting to the seat, he can be so greedy and individualistic and selfish at the same point and not care about everybody in his nation. So there is a lot of inflation that is happening, and that is why many people have lost business. The Zimbabwean government comes up with impractical solutions for the people. You know what I mean when I talk about impractical solutions. You've heard of things to do with we'll have to have better prices of goods, and only to have the highest price for the common basic goods like fuel and everything that we use every day. So it becomes also ironical that we have the Muramba Tsivuna. You have to say it slowly because it's a complex word. We are not used to this. The Muramba Tsivina. It's a group that is being used to demolish and distract the opponents. The slum dwellers are quite affected. You can imagine living in, let's say, the slums in Kenya, let's say Korokocho or any other that you can mention, and then your home is demolished. Where do you go next? And you imagine of the rent in other places. You're used to the slums, and often they are cheap, and life there can allow anybody, even of the low cadre. Now, at the end of it, it's ironical that the Muramba Sivina has to is being used to curb the spread of diseases and crime. That is what the leaders say. I quote it because that is exactly what we are told in the text. And so we have a lot of crimes that happen. You can imagine after you demolish the home of a slum dweller, what do you imagine? The next thing is that they'll be running for your pocket, and anytime you are not safe walking anywhere. So in the end of it, the real aim of the Muramba Tsivuna is just to punish the urban people, especially those who are in the opposition party. So I welcome you to make contributions on chapter 5 and 6 because there is a lot of information. There are two chapters that are pregnant with information, and next time we'll be meeting, we'll be talking about chapter 7 and 8. This is a book that covers a lot, and it's a political book, and we really have to make students understand everything in it. And as colleagues, I welcome you. We have to really hold a discussion so that we understand a lot about fathers of nations. Bye bye, and subscribe to find more chapters and more analysis and critical discussions on fathers of nations. Bye bye.